July 17th, 1994. Billions of people all across the world are watching the World Cup final between Italy and Brazil, their eyes glued to their screens. The game has dragged on for the full 120 minutes of normal and extra time without either side scoring. For the first time in World Cup history, the title would be decided by penalty shootout. Under the baking Californian sun, Roberto Baggio, Italy's greatest and best player in the world in 1993, steps up to the penalty spot. Italy are already in trouble at this point. The score is 3-2 to Brazil. Baggio needs to score his penalty just to keep the Italian dream alive. It's hard to overstate the significance of this moment. Two giants of world football facing off for the ultimate honour. The hopes of an entire nation resting on one man's shoulders and one old man's promise burning in his heart. Baggio steps back, runs up and takes his shot. The crowd roars, the Brazilian manager and players burst into celebrations. Baggio can do nothing but hang his head in shame. He would forever be known as the man who died standing. This is his story. This is his legacy. Baggio was born in Coldono, Veneto, up in northeast Italy in 1967. Like most boys his age, he took a keen interest in football, and by the age of 9, many of the other townsfolk had taken note of his talent. Baggio came to be known as the local boy who would make magic happen with his feet, dribbling past defenders and scoring from impossible angles. This kind of talent doesn't go unrewarded, and his local team recruited him into their youth team. There, Baggio soared. At just 11 years old, he had played 26 games, provided 20 assists, and scored a staggering 45 goals. In one game, he even put 6 past the keeper. Baggio realised he was far too gifted to stay with Coldono, so when a talent scout from the Serie C side, Vicenza, offered him the chance to play at a much higher level, he jumped at the chance. Again, Baggio proved his talent, scoring 110 goals in just 120 matches, averaging nearly a goal a game. In 1983, Baggio made his very first professional appearance in the Serie C for Vicenza, coming on as a second-half substitute in the 1-0 loss at home to Piacenza. Now 16 years old, the young star had always been a big fish in a small pond. His first real match was a serious wake-up call. Going toe-to-toe with tough, experienced men was a whole lot different than playing against skinny youths in the Italian countryside. But Baggio didn't let that dissuade him. He kept training, and the following season he scored his very first goal for the club in the big 3-0 win against Brescia. That was just the start, however. That season, still only a teenager, Baggio scored a very impressive 12 goals. Thanks to his efforts, Vicenza were promoted to the Serie B. He was named Player of the Season in the Serie C for his meteoric rise to the top at such a young age. Baggio was on cloud 9, rightfully so too. How many teenage boys dream of just playing at such a high level, let alone being the star player in one of Italy's most competitive leagues, before even turning 18? Naturally, the real giants of Italian football started to take notice of Baggio's talents. Towards the end of the 1985 season, Fiorentina came knocking on the door. This was one of the biggest clubs in all of Italy. Fiorentina had won the Serie A twice, won the Coppa Italia 4 times, and even had a prestigious European Cup title to their name, and they wanted Baggio. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Baggio would soon be playing against the very best of the best in the country for a historic team. He couldn't have asked for more. Without a second thought, he accepted and was ready to start his real career the following season. Then, tragedy struck. On the 5th of May, Baggio ruptured both of his ACLs while sliding in for a risky tackle in a game against Rimini, just 2 days before the deal for his transfer to Fiorentina was set to be finalised. One ACL injury is enough to put most players' careers into question. 2 at the same time is downright catastrophic. Baggio felt absolutely devastated. He didn't just not know if he would play for Fiorentina, he started to wonder if he would ever even play football again. On New Year's Eve that year, firmly stuck at the bottom of a deep pit of despair, Baggio considered quitting the sport altogether. But that night, the phone rang. His girlfriend was on the other end of the line, and she gave him what must have been the greatest pep talk of all time, urging him to play on. When he put the phone down, Baggio sat down and thought for a while. His mind raced with a million different thoughts, but Baggio couldn't get the image of his father crying at the World Cup final in 1970 out of his mind. Italy had lost 4-1 to Brazil that day, and the entire country had suffered terribly from the loss. Baggio was just 3 years old at the time, and promised his father after the game that he would one day win the World Cup for him. Baggio decided right then and there that he would make a full recovery, train harder than ever before, and fulfill his promise to his father. He would one day lift that World Cup trophy and bring glory to all of Italy. Baggio continued his physical recovery and soon felt fit enough to play again. To their credit, Fiorentina put their full faith in the young star, finalising the deal despite his injury and giving him all the time and support he needed. It wasn't until September the 21st, 1986, over a year later, that Baggio would make his first appearance for the club in the 2-0 win at home against Sampdoria. More importantly, he played at the European level for the first time ever the following day in the UEFA Cup against Portuguese side Boavista. But the fates are cruel. ACL injuries often leave players vulnerable to further injuries, and just 7 days after making his debut, Baggio suffered another injury. He had to undergo a 220-stitch surgery on his knee, making him lose 12 kilograms and missing most of the season. It was another huge setback, but somehow, Baggio, who converted to Buddhism, found the inner strength to continue. He simply couldn't give up. The season continued, and things started to look very bad for Fiorentina. The team was struggling, and if things continued, they would be relegated to Serie B. On April the 26th, 1987, Baggio made his return and played against Inter Milan. 2 weeks later, in the penultimate game of the season, he scored a free kick against Napoli, the Italian champions captained by none other than the legendary Diego Maradona. It wasn't just Baggio's first goal in the Serie A, it was also the equaliser in a 1-1 draw, which ended up saving Fiorentina from relegation. It was an incredible achievement. Even though he only had a few games in the top flight under his belt, people started to take notice of Baggio as a serious young prospect. Pundits praised his silky skill on the ball and his never-ending work rate. Most importantly, he had an impact on the games he played, never letting the occasion get the better of him. Considering he had just made not one but two miraculous recoveries in the span of 2 years, it's safe to say Baggio earned the praise. His manager, Aldo Agroppi, even said of Baggio, "The angels sing in his legs." The following season was mostly unremarkable, however. Fiorentina finished comfortably in mid-table, but also failed to secure a European spot. Baggio scored 9 goals in 34 appearances for the club, 6 in the league, 3 in the Coppa Italia. Not bad numbers, but nothing to write home about either. But this was the first time that Baggio had the chance to rack up some much-needed experience in the top flight for a whole season. Now that he was used to Serie A's intensity, he could take the next step in his career. His hard work paid off immensely in the 1988-89 season. Baggio cemented his place as a regular starter and absolutely soared, scoring a very impressive 15 goals in the league and 9 in the Coppa Italia. They reached the quarter-finals of the Cup thanks to his efforts, but were eliminated by the eventual winners Sampdoria. Baggio worked particularly well with Fiorentina's striker, Stefano Borginovo, so well in fact that people nicknamed the duo B2, while Baggio himself became known for his iconic ponytail. Fiorentina finished 7th in the Serie A, pipping Roma thanks to their positive goal difference. This secured them a spot in the UEFA Cup, the second tier of European football. Fiorentina fans started looking on Baggio as a club hero, a true gem that could lead them to future greatness, while the rest of the league looked on in envy. The next season, Baggio beat his record. He scored 17 goals in Serie A and kept the club in healthy form as they battled against relegation. Most importantly, he led Fiorentina to the UEFA Cup final, where the club had a real shot at European glory. All they had to do was beat their bitter rivals Juventus to lift the trophy.
Sadly, it wasn't to be. Juventus beat Fiorentina.
But the fans recognised Baggio's efforts and gave him plenty of support, eager to see what lay in store for the club. He was awarded the Bravo Award for Best Under-23 player in the league. The future was bright. Their worship quickly turned to hatred. Baggio announced he was moving to Juventus, the same rivals that had just denied Fiorentina a European trophy for a record-breaking £8 million. The fans felt betrayed, and many took to the streets to riot, throwing Molotov cocktails and destroying property. The chaos led to 50 people being injured, which goes to show how seriously the fans took this treachery. But Baggio had more on his mind than the feelings of a few thousand football hooligans. He had just signed for the biggest club in all of Italy and was determined to build a legacy unlike any other. Baggio knew it was now or never. Baggio's first season playing for Juventus went well. He scored 14 goals in the league and 3 in the Coppa Italia, which was lower than his previous seasons, but he also faced more competition for playing time, given the higher quality of Juventus' squad compared to Fiorentina's. The biggest difference for Baggio compared to his time at Fiorentina was in Europe, however. Juventus competed in the European Cup Winners' Cup, the next tier up of European football, meaning the competition he faced was far more experienced and ruthless than before. But Baggio was never one to shy away from a challenge. Not only did he go toe-to-toe with some of Europe's best teams, but he also shined in the competition. Baggio became the top scorer, putting 9 away in total and leading the team to the semi-finals, where they were taken out by Johan Cruyff's Barcelona, nicknamed the Dream Team. It wasn't only clubs that took notice of Baggio's talents. Azzeo Vicini, the manager of the Italian national team, came knocking on his door and offered him a place in the team. Baggio gladly accepted, and in the 1990 World Cup, he helped Italy progress to the semi-finals. They were eliminated 4-3 in a penalty shootout to Argentina, with Maradona scoring the winning pen. Baggio kept coming so close to glory, only for it to be snuffed out at the last second. He had gained a tremendous amount of experience at such a young age, but the heartbreak was starting to get to him. He wanted more than just recognition from pundits and fans, he needed silverware and glory. So Baggio set out to train harder than he'd ever trained before. The next season, Baggio played his heart out and scored 18 goals for Juventus in the league, coming second to only Marco van Basten in the race for top scorer. Juventus finished second in the league behind Milan and reached the final of the Coppa Italia, but lost out to Parma. Despite his great performances, Baggio was frustrated. Twice his team had finished as a runner-up in the season. Nobody remembers second place, and he was determined to reach the top. The following season, Baggio was made captain of Juventus and absolutely dominated the league, shattering his record by scoring 21 league goals. The team won neither the Scudetto nor the Coppa Italia, and it looked like Baggio was in for another season of disappointment. Then, he put in 2 world-class performances in a row against Borussia Dortmund in the 2-legged final of the UEFA Cup, scoring twice and assisting once in a massive 6-1 win. Baggio lifted the trophy with a smile on his face and knew from then on he would only ever care about winning. For his efforts, Baggio was awarded that year's Ballon d'Or, leading many to recognise him as Italy's best talent. With the 1994 World Cup looming over the horizon, Italian fans all over the country started to believe he would be the man to finally lead them to glory. Baggio would indeed make history that year, though not in the way he'd hoped. Juventus again finished second in the league the following season, with Baggio scoring 17 goals.
More important was the World Cup, where Italy were finished first in the group stage, and the Italian fans had put all their hope on Baggio. But Baggio didn't let down.
He rallied the team and the fans, putting in monster performances during the knockout stages and scoring 5 beautiful goals to beat Nigeria, Spain and Bulgaria 2-1 each. The fans could hardly believe it. Italy were in the World Cup final against Brazil, all thanks to one man's undying determination. Then it happened. After years of hard work and grit, after dragging his country to the cusp of international glory, Baggio missed the last penalty and gave Brazil the World Cup title. His worst possible nightmare had come to pass. Since that infamous moment, the name Roberto Baggio has mostly been associated with that penalty miss. The miss caused Baggio to spiral into a deep depression. He blamed himself for failing to fulfill his promise to his father and couldn't find the same form after the defeat. In the following 3 years, his stats dropped and managers decided to end their dependency on his talent.
He moved to AC Milan after a final season with Juventus where he only scored 7, but helped the team to finally win the Serie A.
It was some comfort, at least, to win silverware for the club he'd grown to love.
At Milan, he failed to impress the following 2 seasons due to disagreements with the manager.
He scored only 12 goals over the 2 seasons and was left out of the Euros 1996 squad, leading many to believe his time as a top player was finished. Baggio had suffered the worst injuries any athlete could imagine, both mentally and physically. No player could have pushed on after rupturing both their ACLs at 18 years old, except one. No player could have kept playing after having to undergo heavy knee surgery only a week into returning, except one. No player in football history would be able to commit themselves to the game after going through the terrible heartbreak of missing the last penalty of a World Cup final, except one. Baggio transferred to Bologna, where he mustered all his strength to put in a world-class performance one after the other. By the end of the season, Bologna finished comfortably mid-table with a qualification to the UEFA Intertoto Cup. Baggio scored a remarkable 22 out of the club's 55 goals, just breaking his previous record and earning praise from all of Europe's top leagues. That year, Baggio helped Italy reach the quarter-finals of the 1998 World Cup, where the team went out to France. Though disappointed, his fans applauded him. He had turned things around when things had seemed their bleakest. His redemption was complete. With a heavy heart, Baggio cut off his ponytail, bringing an end to the legend of one of Italy's greatest ever players. Baggio didn't quit football entirely at that point. In fact, he signed for another Serie A side, Brescia, and saved them from relegation thanks to his double-digit goal tallies. He even pushed the club to qualify for the UEFA Intertoto Cup a couple of times, reaching new heights and cementing Brescia's best ever Serie A season. Baggio played his final professional game at the San Siro Stadium against his former club AC Milan. When he came off in the 88th minute, all 88,000 fans in the ground gave the legend a standing ovation. Maldini, Italy's greatest ever defender, even embraced him as he left the pitch. For saving the club from relegation and pushing them to a new level, Brescia retired Baggio's number 10 shirt. Football fans often list trophies when discussing the greatest ever players, and Baggio is usually only remembered for the terrible penalty miss in the World Cup final. But Baggio's legacy isn't about trophies, it's about something far more human: perseverance. While he was an incredibly gifted player, what set Baggio apart most of all was his never say die attitude, always pushing himself back to his feet after suffering a defeat that would have shattered most men's resolve. Football is a game of fine margins. Had he scored that one penalty, Baggio no doubt would have built a legacy to rival those of the greats, standing shoulder to shoulder with giants like Pelé and Maradona. But sadly, it wasn't to be, and he is often overlooked nowadays because of it, causing him to have unfortunately killed his legacy. Fans nicknamed him the man who died standing, but in truth, he was the man who just couldn't die, no matter what life threw at him.
However, there was another player who absolutely loved to party. In fact, he even played the game drunk and scored a hat-trick, so click on the screen right now to find out more.